joining us. My name is Scott Malbaurn, and I'm the director of the Schneider Museum of Art, part of the Oregon Center for the Arts here at SOU. Please note that we have you all on mute, and please remain on mute until the end of the talk. If you have any questions, you may type those into the chat or save them for the end of the talk, where you will be invited to ask Storm directly. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest, Storm Tharp, who is participating in our online exhibition titled What Needs to Be Said, Haley Ford Fellows in the Visual Arts. The exhibition brings together the 13 artists who have received the Haley Ford Fellowship in the Visual Arts between 2014 and 2016, an award given annually to artists living in Oregon that is based on accomplishment, depth of practice, and future potential. Storm Tharp was born and raised in Ontario, Oregon. He attended Cornell University and graduated with a BFA from the College of Architecture, Art, and Urban Planning. He is a painter and sculptor whose work has been included in various public collections, including the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Albright Knox Gallery, the Cleveland Art Museum, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego. He has exhibited his work in select galleries and museums throughout the US and abroad. In 2010, Storm participated in the Whitney Biennial, and in 2013, a mid-career survey of his work titled Third Person was presented at the Johnson Museum of Art at Cornell University. In 2014, he was awarded a fellowship with the Haley Ford Foundation, and he's represented by the PDX Contemporary Art Gallery in Portland, Oregon, as well as Gallery Sebastian Bertrand in Geneva, Switzerland. Storm currently lives and works in Portland, Oregon. Please join me in welcoming Storm Tharp. Hi, Storm.
Hello. Hi, Scott. Hello, everybody.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's very, very generous and kind to be invited, so thanks.
Well, we're so glad to have you. So just to get started, how has life been for you in these pandemic times?
Interesting. I spent most of my pandemic experience in Tokyo. I moved to Japan about 2 years ago, 2.5 years, almost 3 years ago. I'm quite grateful to have encountered it over there. I mean, without the politics or anything like that, the tragedy of how things have happened in America didn't have the same sort of psychological impact and sort of ferocious sort of worrisomeness in Japan. I was exposed to it. My partner, it was a long time ago. Like about a year ago, I went to a birthday party and everybody got sick. But that was, about the end of February. I never had any symptoms, but I still watched it happen, and it was strange. When that happened to me in Japan, would have been around the time that in America, things were sort of first starting to be discussed in Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah, but on the upside of all of that is that it is an interesting place. Japan is a really interesting place to find yourself in a situation like that. It's a very community oriented in a way that it really proved it to me.
Yeah. Well, you are no stranger to the Schneider Museum of Art. 3-4 years ago, you had a solo exhibition with us. You've held a month-long artist residency, and I've been following you and your work ever since. And I really enjoyed, you sharing your experiences while you were in Japan. So welcome back to the U.S. Welcome back to Oregon, and welcome home to Portland. I've made you a co-host on this Zoom, so you are free to share your screen and bring up your presentation when you are ready.
Well, thanks everyone for coming, and I'm a little out of practice giving a talk, and I certainly have never done this before, so bear with me. I hope I am not too long-winded. I tend to be, so I'll do my best to get through it. Yes, this talk I've called Lost Poem. I moved to Japan, like I said, in 2018. But the reason why I'm here today happens to be because of some work that I did in America in 2017. I've showed this work at the Schneider Museum, and I thought that we would start with it because that's just why it's the sort of the ceremony of why we have come together. Um, uh, oh, hold on. Scott, I can't seem to, my cursor's, oh, there we go.
Yeah, go to your screen. There you go.
Huh. My up downs don't work.
Go with the zoom, scroll over your screen and a little window might pop up where you can push the arrows. That working?
Yes, I'm looking for up down though.
Well, I think it's left, right.
Oh, left, right.
There you go.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. All right, this slide says Portland 2017. This is the work that has sort of brought us all together today. It's a very large piece called Cadre. I made it in around 2017. It was inspired by some Dubuffet drawings and collages that I had seen in Los Angeles. One of the things that I've tried to do as an artist is, let me sort of say that again. I often think like a painter. I feel like a painter. I think like a painter, and I do often refer to myself as a painter. But actually, the truth is I'm much more of like a drafts person, like I'm a drawer. And even when I paint, my paintings tend to be like, they're more like drawing, you know, like, and I think it's not that I don't want to be a drawer or a drafts person, but I admire the painting. I admire painting so much that what I have tended to do in my career is find ways to sort of take the drawing sort of out of it, how to figure out ways to let the materials do the work for me. So when I saw these Dubuffet drawings in Los Angeles at the Hammer Museum, I realized that he was doing this kind of like contact print thing where he would draw on a surface and then take a piece of paper and put it over that drawing and then lift it up. And I realized that it was also very similar to things that Warhol had been doing in the very, very beginning of his career when he was still like considered like an illustrator. And I thought, oh, well, this is such a great way to like get out of the drawing. It's such a great way to break habits of drawing well, because even if you do meticulously make the drawing on the glass or the surface, the piece of paper generally smushes it. And so I thought that would be a good way for me to kind of get out of what I can be a little bit tight and a little bit fastidious. So I started with these. These are all they're all 30 inches by 22.5 sheets of paper. That's a standard printmaking size paper. If you went to the art store, that's one of the standard sizes that you would buy. This is an example of how I would make them. I paint on a large sheet of glass, and I usually during this time was painting straight from my mind. There weren't a lot of necessarily photo references because I didn't want them. I didn't want to be sort of hung up by doing exactly what was correct. And I knew that even if I put that much effort into a likeness or something anatomically sort of lovely, the way that the paper would work would sort of ruin it. So it was a very freeing experience. What we don't have in this video is I walk away from it before I put the piece of paper down. So, but I just wanted to give you an idea of actually how quickly I'm working there. And that, you know, wiping that down and putting the ink on and then putting the piece of paper on over that, you know, takes less, depending on what I want, is like less than about 10 minutes. sorry. This would be just more of like a direct example of what the results would be. And the one on the left, it gives you a really good example of how it becomes quite obliterated. Then also on the left-hand side would be 2 layers. That would be me pouring a color onto the glass and and then sort of lifting that first, letting it dry, and then coming back to it with the second layer. The one on the right, which would read vague resemblances, that was just all done with black ink on the glass directly. But what happened is I got excited to see them bigger. And so I figured out a way to start using a really large press to basically do the same idea, the same sort of contact print idea. Here I'm like painting directly onto plexiglass, and then that white thing in the foreground there is actually a piece of paper that's sort of barreled on itself, and it's tucked in underneath. And then when I'm done putting the ink down, then we slowly would roll the barrel over the ink, and it would also distort and become illegible. And all the work on the wall in the back would have been done the same way. And then eventually I ended up having a show of that work in 2017 at the PDX gallery in Portland, Oregon, PDX Contemporary Art. And that show was called Ma'at Mons. And Ma'at Mons happens to be like the 3rd largest volcano on Mars. There was something to me about, I can't remember all the details, and I'll be talking too long if I tell you, if I go into it for too long. So I maybe shouldn't have mentioned the title, but anyway, it's called Ma'at Mons. And then this says Tokyo 2018, and when I moved over there. And this picture would say I'm lost. Living in Tokyo was a dream come true. I absolutely loved it. And what you'll find in the first few minutes of this talk is that I seem quite negative about it, and that is not the case at all. Japan, living in Tokyo was one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. I mean, it's up there with like it's incredibly important to me. But maintaining my artistic practice was challenging. I also was running from some stuff in America in a way as well, meaning art has become something of a burden for me. I find it actually quite difficult to continue doing it. I love it, and it's all that I'm supposed to do, and I know that, and I don't feel sorry for myself. But I don't think that for me, in my case, that art is something that gets easier. I find that making art only gets more difficult, and in a way, I think leaving America was also like, and going to one of the largest cities in the world was an interesting way of like getting lost. And so I both wanted to get lost, and I was actually quite lost. And I wrote a poem about it called Lost Poem. A new home, a return, the plane of day, the ephemeral image repeats itself like a stutter, flash and symbol, symbol of nothing, nothing happens again. A loud train races through your mind, a series of unedited events, a series of details drawn into permanence, no story, click, click, click. His posture, that shirt, that desire, a dream. How did you get here? Silence. That ended up being part of a statement that I am currently using and will be publishing in the next season through a book that's being published by the Hallie Ford Foundation and Reed College. These just are examples of, I work often from photos, or I collect photos, I collect film, I collect things that regard dashed hopes, romance, anything that is easily destroyed and therefore fragile and should be taken care of is something that I find very interesting, and the sort of the preservation of spirit. And in this case, we have a bad printout from a photograph I took of my TV from a David Lynch movie called Mulholland Drive, which I think is an interesting story about aspiration and kind of deformation. And similar at this time, similarly, I'm just sort of thinking about these sort of contrasts in the preservation of self, the preservation of innocence, the easy turn of events which can go sort of dark and sinister. I do sort of love the image on the right-hand side, which is just me looking at two very different versions of Isabella Rossellini. It has less to do with Isabella Rossellini and more to do with the human ability to become whatever we want to become, and the sort of multifaceted sort of treasure of being a person with many interests. Therefore, you'll notice that I talk about film a lot. I talk about presentation a lot. I talk about sort of becoming a character, invention of who we are. And I wrote this in my sketchbook at around that time. I agree with the opinion that you shouldn't run from your problems. For example, moving to a new city in hopes of finding a better version of yourself is fundamentally flawed pursuit. Your problems follow you regardless of where you land or relocate to. I'm finding the same to be true with my art making as I move from one chapter to the next, exploring terrain, if you will, trying to land on that wonderful and enlightened expression. My problems persist. I am followed by what that cannot be resolved inside of myself. It pollutes the new. And this is one of my favorite contact prints from 2017 called Fatal Flaw. So I've been thinking about these things for a while. Fatal Flaw, though, also for me had less to do with who I was and more to do with who was becoming the president of the United States at that time. And so some of the first works that I did in Japan felt like this, not uncommon. I was actually annoyed with these. They sort of seemed like I was returning to something that I already knew how to do, but nonetheless, they are what they are. This is called Tuesday. These are done on gampi, which is a Japanese rice paper. This is called Comforts. And then this one was a little bit better. I got a little bit more into it, a little bit more capable of like letting go and sort of feeling good about things. This is called Guts and Pulse. And on the left is photographed in my studio in Japan. And on the right is it installed. And what you can't see is that it was installed next to a beautiful painting from the 17th century by Cornelius Mahu, who was a Flemish painter. And I felt very fortunate to be next to such a great painter from such a different part of the world and time. This slide is called Spring. And I say spring because if you've ever been to Japan or if you plan to go, I can't tell you more wholeheartedly that you should go in the springtime. Spring in Japan is, I mean, not only is it worthy for us all as visitors and to go in that time, but Japan knows it. Like Japan, the Japanese are fully aware of how absolutely extraordinary springtime is. So many of the things that tend to be very beautiful in their culture revolve around rebirth, newness, new sort of even sexuality, and all of those sort of metaphors that sort of resonate through springtime are just beautiful and everywhere in Japan. And I've never been in a country that so wholeheartedly across all strata of sociology and economics and terrain that everybody celebrates it together quite frequently. The season is called Hanami, which is really about cherry blossoms or blossoming trees. And the idea would be to go and find some with your friends and family and have a picnic outside. There's often drinking is involved, but it is encouraged to do it outside, and it's encouraged to do it with friends, and it's encouraged to do it more than once throughout the season. So I bring it up because any kind of perhaps darkness that I was feeling as an artist was really definitely alleviated as a tourist. Living in Japan at this time was absolutely stunning. And so I started thinking about getting back to work that wasn't just me kind of going through the motions, but instead trying to really formulate like something new that I could be proud of. And I was thinking about the last body of work that I did, which would be emblematic of the image on the right, and how it related to a body of work that I had done about 10 years ago, which is a sculptural body of work, which you can see on the left. And that although they're very different, they also share a lot of formal similarities. And I thought, I wonder if I can take the work that I did in 2017 and sort of make it like sculpture. So that was my first thought. And again, the similarities to me are quite obvious and make me quite happy, actually. But so I started thinking, okay, well, I can start making the fabrics. That's easy. I've done that for a long time. And then I can maybe start thinking about these smaller sculptures. Like I was hoping for something sort of more discreet and not monumental, something easier to have, something easier to share. And so I started building these little maquettes out of styrofoam and thinking about fabrics that I could paint and upholster them with. And I didn't really get very far because I found, frankly, that the image on the right-hand side was just so attractive in and of itself. Like I just didn't, and frankly, I couldn't really get my head around the styrofoam. Like it was kind of driving me crazy. And my studio was small. I was working at home at this time and I didn't have a lot of opportunity to expand. And yet I could do something very easily like I did on the right. And even though that's sort of just a gesture and it doesn't really amount to much, I thought there's something really great about that. So I just started making a lot of fabric. I started painting fabrics of all kinds, doing little drawings. Some of them were abstract, some of them were textural, some of them were figurative, lots of flowers, lots of things that felt like the springtime to me. And I just did that over and over again until I amassed a pretty good amount of them. This is about half of the ones that I liked. And then I was trying to figure out what I should do with them. And, because at first each of them were that size because I was planning on sewing them and I was planning on upholstering these little sculptures with them. And so, but now I have a lot of these sort of small drawing size sort of paintings on fabric. And I decided to do this. Oh, sorry. That's just an example of what one would look like. That would just be regular, that would be like some form of Japanese ink on regular cotton shirting. So the drawing would be totally viewable equally on both sides of the fabric, which was also something that I thought was really kind of a beautiful bonus of working on fabric versus paper. And so I made these sort of collections. I put two collections together. This is just to give you an idea of how transversable they are. The left-hand side, you could say is the front because there's language on it and you can read it. But the back side is also equally as beautiful to me. And although our photographs are covering up a good amount of it, you can see like up in the the left-hand corner on the left image is that beautiful violet color. But on the right-hand side, that is not there. There's a different painting there. And so this was this way for me to make them be reversible and that they sort of worked rather than a painting that you would hang on the wall. And instead, I would hang them as like flags from the ceiling. This was me installing the piece. It's called Shibori, parentheses loner. And I was installing that at 1430 in Portland, Oregon. I came home in the summer for two summer group shows, one at 1430 and one at PDX Contemporary Art. And I was just very pleased. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks of them as a little bit like they're light, not necessarily physically. I mean, like emotionally, like they're not super ambitious pieces. They don't necessarily need to make sense for a lot of people, but for me, they were a really great key and a way of me taking the beauty of springtime in Japan and then manifesting that pleasure into something that I thought was equally sort of visually pleasing. And I didn't try to solve the world's problems with these at all. This would be the second collection. This is called Shibori parentheses eating orchids. And this gives you an idea of the way that they would look when they were installed. And then this, a couple of slides just give you an idea of the front and back of certain panels. And this is a drawing. It's a reproduction of a drawing I did on paper of my partner on the ocean side in a peninsula, sort of southeast of Japan, called the Izu Peninsula. It happens to be one of my favorite places I've ever been to. We had a beautiful little house and were able to sunbathe in the nude, which was one of my favorite things. And again, more front and backs. And then the fall and winter came about, and I started thinking again about previous work and things that I had done. The images here represent some experimentation that I did while I was a resident at the Schneider Museum in Ashland. How many years ago was that now, Scott? Like four years ago, I think. These, again, going to sentiments I said about the presentation of self, the idea of becoming a character, I frequently referencing acting, referencing actors, filmmaking, theater, what have you. What these were really specifically were just this idea of making these little stages, of which I thought I could like perhaps create like almost like a impromptu sort of theater shadow box of sorts on these sort of theaters. They were made out of plaster, which I built in Ashland. And then these were just sort of my first ideas about, like, I was just sort of playing around with scale. Does photography work? Does it need to be sculptural? I also imagine them, by the way, that imagine if they were gigantic. Like, imagine if you walked up to that and you were really only as tall as maybe that little boy's fingernail. You know, like, to me, I just kept thinking of them as these enormous sculptures in like in some unknown place. That also I found to be really exciting, and that might happen someday, you know, when I'm 100 years old. But anyway, what ended up happening with these is I ended up making this painting, which is one of the strangest paintings I've probably ever made. Drawing, painting, whatever you want to call it. It makes almost no sense to anybody. I showed it to an art advisor, a friend of mine in Japan named Chihiro, and she was very confounded by it. She didn't know, I felt badly for her. I could tell she just didn't know what to say. And so I kind of decided that it wasn't any good. Not because of her reaction, but because even I sent it off to my gallery in Switzerland and they didn't even comment. They didn't even say thank you. So I was like, okay, well, I'm obviously losing my mind and I'm making work that nobody cares about, which isn't going to be any help to me. But, you know, a year later, I look at it and I actually find it to be really good. I think it's really compelling, and I don't care that it doesn't make any sense. I think that's the reason why it works. It's called Comedian. But nonetheless, I was disappointed by the reaction. So I just thought, I've really got to buckle down. Like, I've got to work. I've got to like get into a flow. I need to make things that make me want to keep making things. And so I just started to think about pictures. I started thinking about drawing. I started thinking about I just wanted to take idea out of it. I didn't want to think about what things meant. I just felt, it felt stupid. It felt like it was really holding me back. And I felt like, okay, then I just need to just paint whatever is around me. And I started, you know, collecting a studio or making a studio that sort of felt like things that were interesting to me, that I thought, you know what, you're just gonna have to start painting everything. Some things are gonna be in your mind. Some things are gonna come from photographs. But you're not doing anything at all by waiting for some idea to hit you over the head. Like that's not helping anybody. And if you don't know what to draw, then just start drawing everything that you can. And so I did. And eventually, slowly, it started to become something actually quite profound to me. And at around that time, well, actually not, in the 2 years preceding this time, I had read all of the Rachel Cusk books, and I don't know if any of you have read them. There was a trilogy, and starting with Transit, or ending with Kudos, Transit, and Outline. Outline was the first one. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend them. She's a British sort of modernist writer, feels a little bit like Joan Didion, but a lot more plain, a lot more boring, but really, really exactingly gorgeous. And she wrote this in Outline, which I wish you could read. I'm sorry that we're covering it. Dang. I don't even, it said, the time spent swimming in the pool beneath the waterfall belonged nowhere. It is part of no sequence of events. It is only itself. Okay, I'm gonna reread that. That time spent swimming in the pool beneath the waterfall belonged nowhere. It is part of no sequence of events. It is only itself. Okay, I just think that is absolutely gorgeous. And it really goes in the face of so many things that we're being taught, and we should be taught. A very sort of Eastern idea that like we are all connected, that there is no coincidence, that every action is related to another action, everything is a web type of thing. And I agree. And I think that that is probably a very sociologically responsible way of thinking. But when you're stuck and you keep relating everything you've done to a past failure or to something that hasn't worked or something that you want that you can't get, or a desire that you want but you can't find, or something that you can't find again, I just find that it's really not a help to like link everything. Like it really is just sort of nice to think about some things as just being very discrete. And what I started realizing when I started thinking more specifically about that quote was how nice it would be to just have a bunch of drawings that had almost no relationship to each other at all. That in fact, that they could like occupy various forms of my output and style, and that they can just go right next to each other and they get to be their own thing. And that in the whole thing, they become a web. Of course, they're related, but almost like a train that goes by you, rather than this collection or a suite of drawings. And I found that to be a very, very important thing to kind of get me going. And so I started painting everything. As you can see on the left, that we become the sort of an endeavor for about a year and a half. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read this quote without being able to see it, you guys. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say we can see your screen, so we wanted you to know that.
Okay. You can see my screen totally. I can't see it because I can only see you. I mean, I see my screen, but I can't see past you. So
you can minimize all of us on the top where we are all listed. There's a top bar, and there's
yes,
like a little triangle and a square and a double square and then a grid. You can click on like the single line.
Okay, great. And then I can go back to, oh, yeah. Got it. Wonderful. So okay, great.
We have those same controls at home, so we can see your screen.
Okay, so here we go. Going back one page though. So that's my sketchbook there. Seeking Fragrance was something that my partner, Mike, read to me when we were on holiday. And it was an absolutely stunning quotation from Mishima from the book called Runaway Horses. And this is the quote from which it comes. In this intermediate state, according to Buddhist lore, one existed not as a merely spiritual being, but in the form of a fully sentient young child of 5 or 6. Now, however, all the ordinary powers were marvelously heightened. The eye and the ear became incredibly keen. One heard the most distant sounds. One saw the most hidden of objects. One was immediately present wherever one wished to be. These invisible children nourished themselves on the fragrance of burning incense as they went through their rapid journeys through the air. Hence, this intermediate state was also known as seeking fragrance. Which I think is stunning and also kind of helped me sort of see my drawings as these sort of like this sort of seeking of anything, these sort of seeking of like the gorgeous thing that happened on the train to the flowers that are a little bit overbloomed in the corner of my home to a photograph of my father from 1972, etc. Like all of these things could sort of come together and kind of represent a world. And so the next few slides are going to be me just sharing with you what those pictures were. This is called Lad Ave. This is called P. This is a drawing of my mom. It's from 1991. The photograph is, or actually 1990. We were in Rome. I was studying, I had the fortune to be studying in Rome as a foreign exchange student, and my mom came to see me for Thanksgiving. Sorry. This is called American. This is called Her Smile and Her Hat. This is called Fosse. Reason being is that I have an oh wow postcard that I hang on my wall, and the drawing is basically a painting of that card on the wall with a prized plant that I have in front of it. But the card actually is, for me, a reference to Bob Fosse, who is one of my favorite directors. And this would be a scene from the movie All That Jazz, of which oh wow is one of the sort of designs on that wall. So I've carried the oh wow postcard around for almost 25 years now, almost everywhere that I go. It's not so much that All That Jazz means everything to me, but Bob Fosse does mean quite a bit to me. And something like a character who was able to make like an unbelievable mark, like an indelible mark in his filmmaking and his choreography, but he didn't make a lot. He doesn't have a lot of films. There's only a few, and they're all really, really good. The one on the left is called Omar Omar. At first there were two, but I edited out the one that is not larger on the page. This is called Director. This is called Stranger. And this probably was a direct reflection of like COVID. Now I'm not working in my studio anymore. I'm having to work at home because Tokyo's under quarantine. I'm taking care of my partner at home, making lunches and all those types of things, and working out of our guest bedroom. And so I suspect that that's where this comes from, the sentiments of it at least. There are three of these, and I'll try to be brief, but part of the range of the paintings would also be to hearken to some purely abstract work that I love and I have made in my past. I don't make a lot of it. Most people regard me as a figurative artist, and so far in art history, being figurative and representational does not jive with being a pure abstract painter. They don't seem to be things that intermingle, and I have never really fully understood why. I'm completely curious about all forms of painting. So of course I want to know what my versions of abstraction would feel like and look like. And when I went to the Kabuki, when I saw Kabuki for the first time, I was absolutely floored by the curtain. The curtain is stunning, as you can see on the left. So I did a little bit of research about it, and it turns out that there are 3 curtains of every single kabuki theater in Japan is one of the 3 curtains. This one in the sequence would be persimmon, black, and then jade, and it is called Ichimuraza because it was determined, it was first made for the Ichimura Theater, which is the first 3 curtains are representing the first 3 nationally distinguished kabuki theaters in Japan. So not only am I hearkening back to this idea of the stage and the idea of pulling a curtain to reveal something and to be entertained and a captive audience, all those things that I find fascinating, I also am blown away by just the gorgeous perfection, sort of abstraction of the curtain in general. So I did 3 of them. This is called Our Lady of the Flowers, which was just a series of about 6 or 8, 10 drawings that were driving me crazy. I couldn't get them right. And this would have been back before things were really feeling good in the studio, when I was more feeling lost and confused. And I just ended up cutting away all of the best parts because the drawings themselves were not good. And then I realized that the parts of them together were kind of interesting. And so I put them into a Mylar bag and fastened them that way. And that piece is more of a collage than it is a drawing. This is called cul-de-sac. This is called Brush in the Emptiness. And the one on the right would be one of the preparatory drawings that I did for it that I like a lot. There's oftentimes, if any of you do painting and drawing or do any figurative work, there's something about the sketch that is sometimes better than the final. And then the final sometimes does something that the sketch can't be because it's not a sketch. So there's something about these 2 together. I wish I could make them one piece. But I'm quite proud of it. I do love the one on the left a lot. This is called Apology with Knee Pads 2011, made in 2020. But the photograph that I'm referencing is of me in my studio in 2011 in Portland, Oregon. And here's the second of the kabuki curtains. This is jade, black, and persimmon in that order. So I know the colors are the same, but actually the sequence of colors are not the same. And this is called Moritaza. And then of course, you know, not only did the pandemic hit us all so drastically, but also America was going through such an incredible reckoning with race again. And it was surprising and shocking to so many people, I'm sure, that what we thought we knew and our responsibilities that we were probably feeling proud of were still not, we still had so much to learn. At least I did. I had a lot to learn. And this would be the one and only piece I made to reflect that feeling. This is called Sleeper. This is a piece also similar to the other collage piece where it was just like me cutting away things that were working in drawings, but not having any place to put them, and then realizing that all of the leftovers kind of go well together. And this is called Rope of Sand. It's made out of Gompi paper, which moves very beautifully on its own if there's just a little bit of wind in the room. So I wanted to show you that little thing. So with this one, when you walk by it, the hand kind of like lifts up and waves at you. But it also reminded me of these beautiful fish that you find everywhere ubiquitously throughout Japan, oftentimes around a national holiday called Children's Day. This is called Phyllis. She's pulled from a favorite film of mine from 1992 called Secrets and Lies. It's a Mike Leigh movie, British film. One of the things I've done is to try to figure out ways to take the drawing out of the drawing and to try to put as much accident prone things in there as possible. In this way, I'm just using a certain kind of brush that makes it really difficult to like be perfect. And so I think that's sort of part of her charm. This is the last of the curtains, and this is called Nakamuraza. This is called Lost Dog. Also, my dad became quite sick before I left for Japan, and I knew that it wasn't going to be very good while I was gone, and it was not. And he became very, very ill. And so I was coming to a time in Japan where the sunflowers were really popular. And in Japan, the sunflower is it's a big symbol. It's similar, I've heard is similar to the way that they're sort of imagined in France as well. That the name is called Himawari, and the name in and of itself means to like turn to sun. So this was dedicated to my dad. And this is the final drawing from the series. This is called Tatue. It's a gentleman that, yeah, he's so charming and handsome, and he's so very, very, very well dressed. I mean, he is well dressed for Japan in a big way. Not everybody looks like that. Not everybody pulls that off, and he is. I'm just totally in love with that guy. So this ends up becoming the body of work. This becomes the idea that everything is sort of discrete from itself, that it is related, but doesn't have to, it can sort of, all of them can sort of work on their own. They don't have to be sort of like explained by each other. And I did decide that rather than put them in any form of grid or let the gallery present them as they wanted to, I realized that they needed to be in this order. So they were presented like a train in one long line throughout the gallery from left to right. So that would be left to right, top to bottom. And I showed them to you in that order. So this would be one wall. Again, this is back in Portland, Oregon. I flew home in September for this to say goodbye to my dad, and also to have this show. And I guess, you know, one thing about me that actually I find really frustrating is that I feel such strong, deep misery about everything and often in my life. And I am always so worried about that I'm not doing it enough, that I'm not good enough at my job, that I'm broken, that I'm never gonna make the painting that I have in my heart type of thing. That's just the selfish stuff. Then there's the world to worry about as well. I mean, I'm a real hand wringer, and I started out this talk sort of explaining that feeling of being lost in the poem and all these things. But the truth is, and this is what drives me crazy, is that I do land on my feet. And I guess it's just the process that I have to go through. I have to doubt it in order to know that it's good. And I don't, and I guess I'm so used to feeling that I might take it for granted or something. And I see myself taking things for granted all the time, and I don't want to throw my talent away, that I just sort of have become this like kind of miserable artist. And Scott can know it. I try my best to joke around about it, but the truth is that I'm quite deeply, deeply disturbed by making art. And yet this show happened, and I think it's one of the prettiest things I've ever made. I'm really crazy about it. So there you go.
Thank you, Storm. Do you have more, or was that the last slide?
Actually, I just have a couple more, but if I've gone too long, let's just stop there.
Yeah, let's open up for questions now. Would you mind to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
And for those of you at home, if you have any questions for Storm, you may type them into the chat, and I will be happy to read them aloud. You also may be happy to unmute yourself and ask Storm directly.
Hi, Storm.
Hi.
I just, first of all, your work is so incredible, like really so incredible. And I kind of just wanted to like touch on that last thing you said where you're, I don't know, just like the conflict of making art or never thinking that you're going to make something that is like, I don't know, just that feeling is something that, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people really understand. But seeing all your work is just like you are like a magician. Really, it's so incredible. Yeah, I think I just wanted to say that.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tori.
I mean, I can elaborate a little bit about it, but I've said it, and I don't want to talk for too long, you know, but there's like some really crazy misconceptions out there. I mean, women have had to deal with these misconceptions forever. People of color had to deal with these misconceptions forever, but there's also just general emotional misconceptions about like what happiness is, how it's sustainable, what we're supposed to do with our accomplishments, why we're supposed to be grateful for what. I mean, like pain is pain, suffering is suffering, worry is worry. And I'm just, you know, I think a lot of my doubts just sort of come from the fact that I know that I'm really lucky and I know that I have everything. But there's something deep and down inside of me that just really still lacks confidence, and I still feel like a fraud. Like I'm just waiting to get found out that I don't have what it takes. And I don't want that to happen. So I scramble, you know, to like keep myself somehow relevant, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult. I just don't have the energy to keep like defending myself all the time.
Jennifer Longshore, I see you are unmuted. Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I would like to say I'm sure many of us, like Tori, your work is beautiful and amazing. In that last show, your beautiful quote about each one being individual and in every moment of our existence can exist individually is really interesting. And then to look at that body of work from that perspective, but then to see how magically it works together, the color palette and the line, it is just, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And DeSalvo.
Hi.
Hi.
Storm Tharp. I want to echo what Jennifer said, but I also have a question. Your your feelings about being an artist, making art, have they changed, gotten worse with the COVID problem? Because so many people go into this kind of funk, kind of being in limbo, and I just wondered how it affected you, and had it did it make a big impact on your work?
No, it did not. But being in Japan was a really big, it was a very, very different situation. I mean, it didn't, I want to tell you, but I also don't want to waste too much time talking about it too much because it's just more of like a cultural issue. But, you know, this is a country that's survived a nuclear bomb, has recently survived, you know, thousands and thousands of people dying from an earthquake and a tsunami. They've been wearing masks for a really long time. And also, it is a more homogenous culture because most of the people that live there are Japanese, unlike in America, which is beautifully a melting pot. So what ends up happening, I think what happened over there was that there was so much more of a calm about what was happening. And there wasn't a lot of alarm. And because of that, also there was a lot more of humane sort of freedoms were still sort of available. At the height of it being bad, people didn't take trains and things like that, but you're still, and most people tried their best to stay inside. But the point is that when it was possible to do anything, I was able to go to my studio. I was able to work. And so really the only thing that was really different for me was just knowing that it was going on in the world, but I still had a very safe existence getting from my apartment to my studio. And I didn't have the shocking sort of newness that they were just the community just was like, oh yeah, this happens. We know what we're doing. And so I just followed in line. And so I didn't have to worry about it too much, to be honest. To be honest, I think I was much more touched by the civil unrest in America. I mean, that was much more that was sort of hitting me in my gut. Like I was like, oh, I felt terrible being in Japan for that.
Thanks, Storm. Susan Merle.
Hi. I love what you were, thank you for just being so open about your feelings, your role as an artist and it getting harder to make work. I just had this question popped up in my head about whether or not you feel like this is particular more to our culture in the US. I feel, I mean, when I've been on international residencies, sometimes I've seen that other artists from other places are a lot more comfortable with claiming themselves as an artist and not having to be at the pinnacle top peak of their careers in some way. And I wonder do you feel like this is how you're feeling is kind of, I don't know, culturally relative, or do you think it's particular to, your own psychology? Certainly if it is, it's shared by, I would say, a good majority of the artists I know, but can you speak to that?
I can a little bit. Thanks for the question. Nice to see you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just read something in the New York Times the other day it was an article about black painters who were abstract painters that were sort of getting their attentions, and some of them passed away, some of them are alive. And they were quoting some person that I had never heard of before, which is sort of part of the beauty of all of this, who was just sort of saying something to the effect of like, one of the benefits of being ignored was that, for as long as he had been, was that he also was a great believer that like fame was terrible, and that any smart person who was making art was like staying really far away from it because it sucks and it's not good for art and it's not good for painters. And so I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I do think it must be cultural. I mean, I'm a real A type go-getter. I used to be like a leader, like I'm not anymore. I was, and I liked it. And that's how I got into college. It's how I did shit. Excuse my language, sorry. But so I do think it's cultural. I do think it is very Western. I think it's very American. I think it's super competitive. But that said, my problem is spiritual. Like my problem is inside of me. My problem is not about fame. My problem is doubt and desire and hope and a real strong want to make a painting that I believe I can make, and I still haven't made it. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Storm. We are running out of time now, and I just want to read from the chat, in which I think all of us are really touched by your words. From the chat, from Amy Snyder, it's so refreshing and relatable that you feel the same imposter syndrome that so many of us do. And another comment from Jennifer: thank you for sharing your vulnerable self. And from Dawn: thank you for your presentation and artwork. are wonderful, alongside your heartfelt and genuine words, all touched her greatly. And then lastly from Susan, fantastic, always loved your work, but never imagined you would be so candid. Very generous of you, Storm, thank you. And I agree, Storm, artists, young emerging artists, our students here at SOU, local community and beyond, we all have our ups and downs and doubts. And you have a talent with your art and your design and your choices. And even in the time of the lulls, your advice of, to continue to draw what's around you and continue to work. And there will be continued ups and downs. So thank you again so much for your time, Storm, and sharing that with us. I'll let you have the last word, Storm, if you would like to say goodbye.
Well, thank you so much. It really is just an honor and a pleasure, and I'm very grateful to have people want to hear things. And I'm glad. I'm glad it sounds like it was all right. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, Storm.
All right. See you later. Bye.